Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Valerie Barnes, and I'm really excited to be able to share this conversation I had this evening with a friend, a mentor of mine, Brandon Hudgens. This is new for the both of us, so we decided to just give it a try and talk about some real life challenges that leaders are faced with, not just leaders, but us as individuals are faced with. And Brandon's going to share more about some of his experiences as a consultant, working with teams, navigate through some of their challenges. So, with that being said, thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks. One. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Valerie Barnes. So excited to have you with me today. With us today, actually, sorry about that. We have the one and only Brandon Hudgens. He is the VP of Stevenson and Associates, which is headquartered out of Dallas, Texas. He's a super consultant. He's an awesome leader, someone I admire. He's been a mentor, a coach, a sales mentor for me on my career journey. So I'm super excited to have him with us today. Brandon, why don't I turn it over to you? Why don't you do a quick introduction so everyone can hear from you yourself about who you are.
Valerie, thank you very much for that incredible introduction. I'm going to do everything I can to live up to what you just pitched right there. So, as Valerie said, I'm Brandon Hudgens. I'm with Stevenson Associates out of Dallas, Texas, and we're a practical, solutions-focused company for people in work, helping people achieve more, work better together. Um, it's impressive that the size of the company is irrelevant. If you have great employees, your company is going to prosper, thrive, and grow. And if you have even a few poor employees, it's going to set you back. It's going to hold you back from satisfying your clients and making those end results. So we help with all of that.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm really curious about the day in the life. So I'm sure we'll get to that in a moment. But just so the audience knows, the reason why we came together is to talk about some leadership topics, life topics. I don't know, just organic conversation. But today I want to talk about conflict and how we can use conflict to help us solve problems. And we'll probably talk about a number of different things. And so I want to lean on Brandon tonight for his expertise. And I have some questions for you. Okay.
Excited.
You're excited? Okay.
Yeah.
So, why did you pursue consulting after working in general management for decades? I think it was pretty much decades.
It was decades, absolutely. Uh, Valerie, I can honestly say that if it were my druthers, I would have everyone either work a year for the government when they get out of high school or wait tables for a year because you learn so much about people under those two circumstances. I have no doubt in my mind. Um, I was in retail sales, I was in retail management long enough that I've seen some of the best and worst in people from a client's perspective, people walking through the door, and an employee perspective, some of the greatest and some of the worst. And I learned from each of those opportunities. What do you do with a great employee? How do you inspire great to be better, greater, go further, or at the very least stay with you as long as humanly possible? And then what do you do with your employees that are more challenging? Because there's a principle I work with, Valerie, and it's really pretty straightforward. I think everyone's going to believe this pretty well. I don't think there's a single employee that signs up an application form and applies for a job and accepts it in the anticipation of failure. Not a one. Likewise, I don't think there's a single employer out there that hires someone thinking, wow, I'm looking forward to them sucking.
I don't.
So, so with those two things as kind of a bedrock principle, The real question becomes, so why is that person that we interviewed and talked to not the same person 2 weeks later? What happened there? Or down the line, why all of a sudden have they left the track and they're no longer performing at the level that we know they're fully capable of doing? How can we help get them back on track? Because earlier today, I was talking to a group of leaders, and it's a huge industry, and these are all brilliant people. And one of the leaders asked I'm not going to say an insane question, but it was a leading question that was, how can I help my group? Open-ended, pretty broad. And I told him, if you're looking for a bullet that's going to help everybody at once, that doesn't exist. But if you were to ask me a more narrow question, how can you help my group by helping the individual? I could tell you we can make that happen. Because they're having some group malfunctions, and I've seen them in my business. So to come full circle to your question and answering it, I've seen the same exact infighting, sabotage, passive aggressive behavior, the upset behavior, the absenteeism, the lack of concern about work quality in my role that these people are seeing in their roles. And I've worked through a lot of the solution sets. So if I can help them with that, that just puts some flutter in my cape. I feel good about that because I've saved both the employer a ton of money and frustration, but I've also saved the morale of the employee. Getting fired is a severe emotional beatdown for anybody. And again, they didn't sign up to get fired. Where did it go wrong?
Yeah, I don't
But
think
that was my inspiration.
Yeah, I don't think the managers want to fire either. I'm sure
No.
it's super tough to have to make that decision and come to terms with it.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, some of those indicators, absenteeism, performance starting to regress. It's challenging for managers to
It is.
feedback. And so now I'm really curious about that situation. When that leader asks, how can you help my group? Did they go on to say with what? Like what are the challenges that they're facing today that you're kind of helping to provide some solutions to help them get through it?
So their primary challenge is, and it's a very high-tech industry. I mean, they're working with some major budgets with some major players, and supply chain, of course, is a challenge. Great skill set assets, people assets are a challenge. Their issue is they've fallen behind in production. Okay. How do we get caught up? Before we fight that, how do we get caught up? What contributed to falling behind in the first place? It wasn't all supply chain, to be perfectly blunt, and it wasn't. When we got into it, we discovered that because fictional names coming up, Tony says something wrong to Maria. Maria passive aggressively digs in with a, sure, Tony, I'll get you that report. Maybe he gets it that day. Maybe he gets it tomorrow. Production slows down. Someone is stressed because somebody barges into their office, interrupts the plan they made out that morning over coffee with every intention of working their plan. And now they're 2 hours behind because they have to reset their apple cart, put all the apples back, and get back on plan. Meanwhile, that whirlwind that just burst through their office, unannounced, unscheduled, they left, but I'm still cleaning up apples, and production falls behind. So these communication, I'm going to call them glitches. The person who barged into the office didn't know that it's going to take that person an extra 30 minutes to reorganize their world and get back on point because they're not wired that way. And the individual who spoke directly, to use it a polite way, to Maria, didn't realize he was coming off that way. And more importantly, he didn't realize that Maria was sensitive to that kind of communication. So once we got them back on the same page and people knew the expectations of the other person, as well as how they tend to naturally roll, because unfortunately, we all think we know ourselves well, but we forget in truth, we're not always the best judge of our own behaviors. We think we're doing one thing, in reality, we're doing something else, and it has consequences. So what they discovered was they've got people trying to speak French over here, and these people are speaking German. And what we've done is we've given them a French to German dictionary
I like that.
and brought them together so they can talk and get things done. And we found back in 23 when we were working with this organization that some severe malfunction was happening, but as soon as they could start speaking each other's language, as soon as they understood each other, that gap closed, and now communication was more open. There was more trust to share ideas. There was respect of schedules. Progress actually started happening. Things started moving the way they're supposed to be moving, and success breeds success. They recognized the value of that, and they said, I think we need to do this on a company-wide level. And lo and behold, that's what they're doing. And that's one of a few different examples. Earlier yesterday, different company, the owner, and this is a small company, so it's important to understand that these problems are not endemic of big companies, small companies. Everybody who works with people have these issues. The CEO of the company that I talked to yesterday, great guy, by the way, very much cares for his team. He's going to have a very, very difficult time giving critical feedback to two of his employees. But because these two employees are not focused on what they're doing, which he thought was synonymous with lazy, not. That was a misdiagnosis. We got them back on page because it's not that they were lazy. The two individuals, and this is in a manufacturing environment, very high energy, creative, high thrust. They like to start and go with projects. The problem is they're very low conformist. They don't like following schedules necessarily. And more importantly, they like doing the things that are interesting to them. They're both high verbal, so they can get lost in conversations with each other. So instead of face down working on constructing some industrial equipment, they talk to each other and they have a squirrel moment and wander off into the other room to work on something completely different. But they miss the deadline for what they were supposed to do in that production moment. The money it takes to fire and rehire somebody or hire a new person is so much more than the monetary time effort to get them back on page. You just have to have those conflict skills to go and say, hey guys, this is what I need you to do, and negotiate exactly what you need them to do. And I don't like saying the word negotiate in the sense that you're captive to your team. No owner of a business, no manager of a business should be hostage to a staff. But at the same time, they're an expensive asset that you invested time and money in. I wouldn't throw out my photocopier just because it said it needed more paper. Why would I do that with my people? They need some tune up. So we help them tune up.
You know, I'm thinking those are real problems. Those are serious. You know, I hear these types of issues on the front lines, being an HR business partner, and now working in employee and labor relations. You hear this, you know, from a macro lens about some of the different challenges that teams are going through and experiencing across larger organizations. But even like you said, on a smaller scale, mom and pop shop, I'm pretty sure they also experience these sort of things. So what kind of mechanisms or tools can managers, you know, start to use today, not just managers, peers, individuals, start to use today to start to work through conflict resolution, independently and then as a group, in a group dynamic?
My background in industrial organizational psychology allowed me to work with a lot of different tools out there. And you may have, I'm sure you have, Valerie, because of your role, heard of a lot of these, everything from strength finders to predictive index, Myers-Briggs. The one that I prefer is the ProScan survey offered through PDP Global. That's what I'm using. In all of my decades of using psychometric tools and evaluative tools, this has probably the highest accuracy of any that I've used. So to answer your question in two parts, know thyself first. If you ask me a starting point, do not turn to the New York Times horoscope page. I think that's going to be about you specifically. Take one of these surveys. Are you an ENTP on Myers-Briggs or are you an ISTJ? And what exactly does that mean? Some surveys do charge, of course, to take them, and that's fine. But start with the things that are free and open on the internet. Myers-Briggs, I believe, is free. There's multiple free links to that. And it's a great starting point. Knowing how you behave sets the stage for how you can change you to meet that person that you've got a conflict with where they need you to meet them. I know that between me and any relationship I have, the only person I have control over to change is me. I can't change my opponent. I might try to influence them, but I'm not going to change them. Mm-hmm. And I say opponent in a nice way. I can, however, change me. So know thyself first. And then, if you've got a relationship that allows you to do this, ask them to take the same thing and compare. I'll give a really keen example. And Valerie, we were working in the same company at the time when this happened. I had a new general manager meet his team on day one. And it was a group of very, very high extroverts, to use Myers-Briggs term, very high extrovert, challenging salespeople. They were just all bubbling energy. Woo! The new manager was, again, using a Myers-Briggs term, an introvert. Now, I don't prefer the term introvert because we're all extroverts. Introvert in Myers-Briggs really translates to they're comfortable talking to people they know and trust. That's the definition of an introvert. I need to know you before I can relate to you well, verbally. Consequently, when he was talking with this group of loud, rambunctious, verbal people, he was literally awash in words. It was a nonstop wave. It was like drinking words from a fire hose. And at a certain point, he started to drown. He walked across the room and sat down, and he was just staring ahead thinking. One of his staff came to me and goes, "Why is he staring at me?" And I go, my good person here, he's not staring at you. He's looking right through you. Right now, he's just trying to recenter himself and think about all that he's just got because he wants to talk to you. He's trying to find the right words to say it. The team, a few weeks later, started to splinter apart because they didn't have the level of communication they were used to from their previous GM. Okay? The new GM did something really brilliant, and this is a good example of stage 2. He shared with people him on a Myers-Briggs test survey. He passed it out, everyone looked at it and goes, "Oh yes, I'm very much that, and this is what I like, and these things kind of irritate me," based on Myers-Briggs traits. He asked if everyone would be willing to take it, and they did. And then they sat around and talked about it. And after that, they understood when you want to go talk to this GM, ask one question at a time. Not question, fill in the silence, fill in the silence, fill in the silence, with 3 more questions. Because he's still thinking about your first question. He wants to answer it right for you. You go, wow. All of a sudden, he could breathe during their conversations. And lo and behold, they got better working together. He was ultimately promoted because he did do really well with the team. But there for a moment, it was rocky. And as a new GM, getting your first big GM role, he was a little nervous. You know, he wanted to do well. Again, I don't think anybody takes on a role to fail. He wasn't going to be able to do the job by himself. He needed a team. You need a team if you're going to lift a lot of rocks. So for him, he invested the time to share about himself. That's important and key. It builds trust if I share first. And then to learn about them. And it got so much better. So that, I would say, would be the 2 steps to really help cut off conflicts that are unnecessary earlier in the game.
Vulnerability. That was the word that came to my mind.
Yep.
We were talking about that. Of course, knowing yourself and being humble enough to say, hey, learn a little bit more about me. And I'm open to sharing more about me. And you kind of have to let your guard down and show that you're committed to build relationships with your team. And so we can be stronger together to move forward and forward progress. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. All right. So another question, just to build upon knowing yourself and also getting to know each other. Diversity is so important, not just how we look, with how we think, and the experiences that we bring. Not all of us are subject matter experts. Some of us have generalist experience.
Mhm.
And so how can we ensure that diversity of thought is not only encouraged, but effectively integrated into decision making on our teams and in our organizations? How do we use diversity of thought into how we operate as leaders?
I was helping that same leadership team earlier today and some of their staff with that very issue. And I'm going to give a really strong prime example. Valerie, you have no doubt that I'm a high extrovert.
Fact.
Fact, yes, fact, not in debate. As a high extrovert, I discovered rather recently, if you can imagine, that I can hog up some airtime when we're talking. I shared with a team that leads various teams to solve very complex technical problems that have very powerful outcomes. I mean, this is about saving lives kind of question. So it's not as though the consequences are without import, they are. But here's the funny thing, the diversity of thought we were talking about, and backing up to that GM that I just mentioned, who is an I on Myers-Briggs, an introvert. You're holding a meeting with a group of, let's say, the right size, 7 to 10 people. And of them, 50% are extroverts, 50% are introverts, or low extroverts. Who's not going to talk in that meeting? The low extroverts. So what do we do from a leadership standpoint? Whether we're just a leader of that team meeting at that moment or leadership of that entire division, it really doesn't matter. How do we encourage the diversity that are in their communication styles to enhance the end product, which is this is the right solution for this problem? In talking with people, I said, high extroverts get 5 sentences and then hit their mute button. Tell them the day before you get 5 meaningful sentences and then I need to shut you down. And they're gonna say, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not that talkative. Yesterday I was told I was gonna boop, mute them. They'll get the point. They'll get the point. But I shared with that same team, your introverts or low extroverts want to say the right thing. They want to be accurate when they open their mouth and chat. A high extrovert can just blab all sorts of cool stuff and something useful will stick to the wall eventually. But an introvert wants to say one thing that is on point. So help them. Give them the question the day before.
Mm.
Give them an agenda. And high extroverts out there, guilty. Stick to the agenda. Don't go wandering off in the flower fields talking about new stuff that they weren't prepared and researched for, because they are not going to share with you great ideas. They won't do it. They've got them, but they don't feel safe stepping out there and impromptu talking about it. How do we set up the diversity of thought? Just this one communication key is make sure they know the question beforehand and they feel prepared. They're going to be grateful for you because they sounded the way they wanted to sound when they talked. I've given an insightful reason that the team can draw from to help further the discussion to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. If you call on an introvert in a meeting and they're not prepared, you're going to get a general, vague, weak answer that really doesn't address the issue. And it shows that they were listening, they got their name, but they weren't given the time to really formulate the proper way they wanted to say it. So at the end of the meeting, you get this weird phone call that gives you this elaborate, beautiful answer that is exactly what you wish everyone could have heard. And you're like, what in the world did I just do? Mm. They feel ambushed when we do that. So again, how we treat those differences result in real outcomes, beneficial outcomes if we treat them right.
So I would say I totally understand that. That resonated with me very much so, because I will be in a meeting, and if it's me and my peer, or me and my manager, or someone that is like my business partner, and we have a really good relationship, we'll be IMing each other like all these cool ideas, and they're like, "Say it, Valerie! Say that! Like, speak up!" And I'm like. hold on, I don't know. I got to think about what I want to say,
Yeah,
and I'm overthinking it. So I totally understand. And I think of myself as an introvert, even though, other people might perceive me to be a bit more extroverted, but I think I'm really comfortable with who I'm comfortable with.
right.
But another thing that I do when I'm with a group of introverts and extroverts is I will encourage folks to use the chat. And sometimes I'm in a meeting and I have the same person speaking over and over again, and no one else is contributing. And you'll say, "Hey, anyone else have any questions or comments?" And it's like crickets.
Yeah.
The moment you say, like, I started to switch my style up where I'm like, "Hey, if you have a thought, drop it in the chat." And so then I start to have a little bit more momentum and activity in the chat and verbally. So it's, you're giving everyone the space to contribute in a way that makes them feel comfortable. And I think that as leaders, we have to be mindful of taking different approaches to draw out those thoughts and ideas that we want them to speak up and say. So just as leaders, let's just be mindful that not everyone communicates verbally. Some people need a little bit more time to process the question, even though your expectations might be that they come with their best ideas on the spot. That doesn't always work best for everybody.
Right.
So just as you get to know your team, think about taking different approaches to draw out their cool ideas and their thoughts, so we can get the best out of them, so they can come to work and feel like they're giving their best all the time.
And set up for success. An introvert who speaks at a meeting when called upon because they were set up for success feels confident. They feel like they contributed. They're excited to engage the next time because you help them feel good about their contribution and their role with the team. To be called out and asked to narrate on something and they aren't prepared for it, now they feel ambushed, maybe even attacked. And it creates a poor perception on their part. They don't like it.
Yeah. Hmm. That was good. That was good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So let's see. What is one piece of advice you wish someone had given you as you were starting your leadership career?
Ah, best piece of advice.
Or both?
Best, I would say one of the best pieces of advice that I wish I had received when I first started managing others was know what they want. Not everybody is motivated by the same thing. I was talking to an engineer recently, and granted, most companies give X for a raise, but it wasn't about the money for him. It never was. It was because his work was contributing to saving human lives, and he was working really hard for that. So his motivator was knowing that the end result paid off. In other words, just share with him an article of, hey, this person used this technology and it saved their life. Share with him these little things. That's all the motivation he needed. And he will never miss a day of work knowing that his work makes that impact.
Hmm.
For some people, it is the almighty dollar, and great, that's fantastic. But some people want recognition. Some people want opportunity. Some people want challenges. Can you imagine?
Mhm.
Earlier today, I was talking with another employee in a company. I said, this individual is not challenged in your company. They are rusting out in front of you. They turn in good product. They're good people. They're not without effort on their part, but you're not challenging them enough because it's right there in front of me. And they'll ultimately find something more challenging. So find out what moves them and know that we all manage from our own bias. If there was a second piece of advice, we all manage from our own bias because we make the mistake of thinking that what motivates me motivates others. And that's not always the case.
Mm. Mhm. Mm. That was awesome. And I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Because we're talking about vulnerability and we're talking about others sharing more about themselves. We can break down those barriers so we can move forward, momentum. How can organizational values support the establishment of culturally safe and psychologically secure environments?
Well, one, the definition of psychologically secure has been tested in so many areas these days because, you know, if you say the wrong thing, you've just turned half the population against you, kind of thing. I find, regardless of which side of the fence you're on, that even to say that question, which side of the fence you on, indicates there's a lot of polarity out there right now. A lot of polarity out there. And it is distracting in that sense that if you make a mistake and say, I'm for candidate X or candidate Y, if you say, I believe in this, and this person says, well, I don't, now you've got a range war with your staff. So, what I have found in the world of vulnerability, sharing, getting to work together as a team, people are not announcing, hey, I'm pro this or I'm anti that, as much as they're holding their opinions and feelings back. They're distancing themselves a bit. So, how can we build that? Tolerance is hard to teach. Tolerance is tough to teach. Of all the things I've had to teach, tolerance is probably the hardest. Because when someone comes at us with a raging opinion and they're loud about it and they're calling us names because our opinion can't clearly be anywhere close to right, it makes us feel defensive. It's just an automatic kind of event. I would say, from a cultural standpoint, cultural leaders are probably almost required to take a neutrality that is unnatural, honestly.
Mm. I feel like that's a topic on the
Yeah, this could end up as a deeper topic, but I think a lot of management, upper management especially, takes a position of neutrality, unless they're an organization that the goal is to promote a particular ideal or idea. I think a lot of management tends to take that neutrality so as not to offend the populace that's there to support the goals. It erodes a little bit of trust because if I know who you are and what you're about, I can meet you there, assuming I have those tolerances.
Mhm.
I'm still looking for a really good survey or test device that analyzes the breadth of someone's tolerance. Some people can tolerate a few things, and some people can't. But this tool I'm using right now does help in that sense because I have found that if I look at people's patience traits, people who have high patience are easier to get along with. People who are low patience are already thinking over their head, is this guy going to make a point? Come on, close out the point. That's an example of low patience. They don't want to hear the other person's point of view because they've already made their mind up. So I would say if you want more gentle group of people in which to work, hire for more patience. And I think that's going to get you a better result.
Well, thank you so much for your contributions this evening. I have really enjoyed our discussion today, Brandon. So I'm sure we'll hear more from you, and thanks so much again.
Valerie, thank you so much for the opportunity. I look forward to working with you again.
All right, take care.
Bye.
All right, so what did you think? I would love to hear your feedback. Brandon would love to hear your feedback. We want to hear the highlights. We want to hear the lowlights. What do you think we could do better? What did you agree with? What did you think? I'm not sure about that. That's okay, right? We talked a lot about diversity of thought and how that is important and how everyone has different communication styles, different ways of thinking, different levels of experiences. We all bring something unique to this table. So please feel free to share. Don't hold back. Thank you again for taking the time to listen. And I hope that you found this conversation to be helpful for you in some way. Have a good day. Take care. Bye.